Share screen. Share. There we go. There we go. Right, morning to everyone. I can see some people. That's very weird. Oh, it's very strange when you can see people. So, right, we've got half an hour together, and I'm not sure who was with us last week or who is new into this. So I'm going to take you through the framework. So if you were with us last week, it's a little bit of a repeat, and if not, then it's where we started last week. For those of you that haven't met me, I'm Vicky Bailey. I have the joy of being a psychotherapist, coach and trainer, which I love, and I specialise in mental health and emotional wellbeing. So that's my delightful day job, which I'm very lucky to do and very privileged to do. I do sit in the SCAD community. So again, if you've not met me before, it's coming up for a year anniversary in May, which is kind of a bit weird, really, that I had my SCAD and I'm fine. There's a photo of my partner and I there in hospital. I was in hospital then, and then my partner, my two girls, at the SCAD walk last year in September, which was lovely. We managed to do the full walk, which was great. And then just an indulgent photo from me, because I'm not getting my bluebell fixed this year because we've got to stay in. So that's from last year. You probably won't see me in the SCAD community on Facebook and things because I choose to stay off social media. Just with what I do for a living, I have sort of very clear lines between personal and professional. So I'm on some social media for professional purposes. So as we go through today, if you've got questions, you can either kind of, if you press the participants button on your Zoom screen, you can sort of wave at us and ask a question, or you could physically just chirp in, that's fine. If not, we'll do questions at the end. We've evolved into having a little bit of a book club, and this is a bit of a quirky book that I read, oh my gosh, I think probably in my 20s, and I'm really not in my 20s anymore. And it's something that stayed with me for that long, actually, and they call it an underground success bestseller. It's quite quirky. It's a story of a woman who is a high-flying American successful entrepreneur, everything materialistic in her life, and she goes on walkabout with the Aboriginals, and it's her journey. So it's a fable, really. It's her journey through her transition of realizing what is a priority in the environment of walking through the desert with Aboriginals, how they shift her priorities. And there's some funny moments of her not being able to access makeup and hair dryers to serious moments of making sure she's got enough water and food. So it's a gentle fable, and it's just quite nice sometimes to have something in there that's a little bit easier than these massive self-awareness books. So if you can get that and you enjoy it, I'd love to hear your feedback. I was talking to, so with what I do for a living, I have a therapist of my own, and then I have a supervisor, and I had a session with my supervisor this week, because although I'm not still back at work in terms of my company, I'm doing a lot of voluntary work, this being one of the voluntary pieces that I'm doing. I'm also volunteering to give therapeutic support to NHS staff. So I have to keep my supervision going. And we were talking about how unusual the time is, and that actually what we are in the midst of is we are living through a trauma. We're not post it, everyone's talking about post, what's going to happen. And again, it pushes the societal consciousness to keep living ahead. And the biggest thing is we can't live ahead because we do not know what's going to happen. What we can do is listen to what's going on around us, be as much as we can in the now, plan where we need to plan sensibly, and stay as present as we can, because the anxiety will be heightened by the ifs and buts that chip in through anything about the future. So for me, I think it is very much about choosing what you listen to and choosing how you manage this situation within your own bubble of whatever that is for you in terms of network and family, friends, colleagues, etc. We cannot legislate for what's going to happen, same as we couldn't on the 24th of March, where I think that was when we went into lockdown. So it's influence what you can, really. And what we're concentrating on today is, last week we started with 2 of these principles. We're doing 2 this week and then 3 next week. Is David Rock and Daniel Siegel are 2 Americans who are pioneering in neuroscience, mindset, and sort of therapeutic intervention around that. And the same principle of having 5 a day, they're suggesting that if we manage these 7 principles daily, we will have a healthier, more balanced mindset, if you like. And it's quite interesting because looking at them, most of us probably wouldn't practice all of them. And for those of us that do practice near all of them, we probably are kidding ourselves of how much we actually invest time in this. So I'm just going to jog you through what the principles mean, and then I will concentrate on a couple of them. So timing is about reflecting, focusing, and we looked at that last week, and it's sort of edging towards mindfulness process. So we'll make sure that you can access last week's webinar if you need to. Downtime, we're going to look at next week, which is basically doing absolutely nothing, which is harder than it sounds. Sleep time we looked at last week, which is looking at healthy sleep habits, really. They will probably be disturbed for a lot of people. Some people it may not. Chinese medicine wise, when typically their principles are when people are in fear that they actually sleep more because they hide. So it depends how you are with your normal sleep patterns and whether there's a change in that for you. So again, we'll make sure you can access last week's webinar. So this week we're going to look at focus time and play time. So I'll jump into that in a sec. Sorry, jumping around. And then the other 2 principles which we'll look at next week are connecting, and that's connecting with people around you, which I think the situation we're in is polarizing that process. So we can unpick that a bit next week. And physical time, so that's interesting, isn't it? Because we're all now being pushed towards a daily exercise, which probably we knew was good for us anyway. I know I'm seeing a lot more people who probably I wouldn't see on my normal running route, or and also with the yoga class that I attend, normally we have about 9 in the class. I think there was 22 last week. So it's all quite interesting how people are sort of going, yes, I must exercise because that's what we're being told to do. So we'll explore that a bit more next week. So focus time is quite interesting, and it talks here about being goal orientated. If we take some of that speak out, what the principle is about is actually focusing on one thing at a time and not multitasking, which if you're anything like me, you're guilty of. You know, going up the stairs, you've got this under your arm, you've got that phone under your chin, you're up, you're down, you're doing all this kind of stuff, and then wonder why you're tripping over. So this is about maybe focusing on one thing for you and actually giving it the time it actually needs to actually connect in and move forward for you. A little bit of science for you. So the background to this is what the principle is they're treating the brain as if it was a muscle, which it's not. It's about the neuroplasticity. So if we focus, if we have this idea of focusing, it does change how your brain works. And if we make this a really good habit, it expands that part of your brain. And what they're referring to is lifelong learning, which as adults, we hear in a different context about going and doing our art classes or our whatever classes we want to do, our writing classes. This maybe isn't that formal. And when I was sort of doing the background reading to refresh my mind on this, what they're saying is, as adults, we lose the ability to learn for ourselves unless we either choose to go to an evening class or we formally go back to uni or something like that. This can be something that isn't necessarily that formal. It's actually needed, though, to keep the neurons firing and to keep our minds honed. So actually, if we're going to do this, it might be, I was trying to think of an example for you, really. I don't very often watch telly, and I've probably watched more telly than I have done in the last year with being off work and recovering, and then sort of a bit more compelling to keep that method going now, really, and now we're in lockdown. It's not something I easily enjoy, it is something I've learned to enjoy. And what I've found is I actually, that's part of my focus time, because I do actually watch particular programs that I enjoy, not necessarily fiction programs. So it might be a documentary or it might be something related to work. And actually not being on my phone or trying to have a conversation with one of my girls or my other half, or having other people around. So I actually, if I'm going to watch certain sets of programs. I actually like the house to be quite quiet. I do not want to be disturbed. I want to have that time for me. And I've noticed then I can take in the information that I'm looking to gain from those programs. So that becomes something that I've actually turned into my focus time. And those distractions of people in and out, you know, normally if you're watching telly, it's fairly easy. Now, I'm not saying you have to watch telly. What I'm trying to give to you is an example where I've kind of minimized the distractions. I've given myself space and time to focus on that. And I'm engaged with that thing at that moment in time. And over this series of webinars, you'll see mindfulness is on there. We've touched into mindfulness. This is absolutely the same sort of principles of saying, look, I'm going to do this activity for myself. So the other thing that we've re-engaged with in this house is puzzles. Love puzzles, really rubbish at them. It's ongoing though, you know, it's one of those you walk past and you think, oh, there's a piece there and I'll just go into it. So maybe actually sitting down and doing that for half an hour is a better way of doing it than keep passing by and hoping that this puzzle will miraculously make itself into a picture. So this is about practicing small chunks that are absolutely about that process and that moment in time. And what you'll find is that you will eliminate a lot of the chatter and your mind and your emotions will start to drop. So if we do one thing at a time, that peacefulness and calm is quite powerfully there. It's very hard, depending on your living arrangements, whether you can actually achieve that. So that I'm not dismissive of. My invitation to you would be to notice what you do enjoy and what goal you want to set yourself. I don't know whether you do want to do a puzzle or you want to colour a whole page of your colouring book without being disturbed, whatever that choice is, or you want to play patience, or maybe you are doing something a little bit more skill based and you're learning a new skill. Fantastic. And maybe the offer there is to notice whether you can, if I go back to this slide, create an environment for a set period of time and say 10 minutes that you can focus in that moment, in that time, on that particular activity. And it isn't mindfulness, it is a mindful process, it isn't mindfulness. So that's focus time, which I think is harder sometimes than we believe the words can lead us to. And then the other one that's quite hard for us grown-ups is playtime. Well, it's not so hard for me because I think I'm still a big kid and an adult. Before we had lockdown, I would be seen in a park embarrassing my girls, taking my niece, going down the slide. Don't think I'm built for slides nowadays. Going on the swing, seeing if I can still, I don't know if any of you used to do that swing where you used to get as high as you could and then jump off. Again, I'm probably not built for that. But those sorts of things, that engagement in a playful activity, which is something that I would enjoy, with no judgment, no inhibition, just a spontaneous, right, let's just have a go at this, isn't it fun, is quite nice. And I think as grown-ups, we lose that ability because maybe the chatter's there or it's not perceived to be okay. You know, my kids are used to me not worrying about what other people think, and they're probably in the same realm now. It takes a big step towards that. So allowing yourself to be spontaneous, creative, playful, whatever that looks like for you. I know the weather doesn't lead us to it now. If you sat on the grass and made a daisy chain, because that's what you used to do and you enjoyed it, anything like that. We're watching Miranda, the box set, and the other day it was the one where she rolls down the hill. We used to do that at uni, just to create some free fun. So there's lots of things that are out there that we could actually play and do. And I think when I was looking at this and how to maybe give some principles on this, what was interesting is the non-judgmental bit. And I think that is of self as much as external judgment. So I think what's interesting is notice if you choose to engage with it, something around play, is how you're feeling about it for yourself around judgment before worrying about others, because I think we're probably our highest own critic. If we can move away from judgment, it does free the mind up, and that we get what one of my clients called the happy dolphins. We get the endorphin hit, we get the pleasure, we get the fun, we get the hit, and it's great, and it is worth having. So I know we're in slightly unusual times and everyone has different living circumstances. I'm sure there's something within the context of your environment that could be created into a playful environment for you. Depending what you have access to. Maybe it's your daily exercise and you're doing something a bit different. You go and skip through the park, whatever that looks like. It doesn't always have to be on your own as well. It could just spontaneously combust with somebody with you, or your family, or your network. So daring to believe that you would like to play is the first step. And all of us, without a shadow of a doubt, have an inner child. We have that energy, that cheeky energy, that little bit that may be a little bit suppressed now and again, that you think, oh, better not do that, because that's your playful energy, that's your child. If you feel that energy, give that energy some attention, and this play process will become a lot easier. In some of the work that I do a lot of work on inner child and listening to the inner child. And I do have one client who's given her inner child a name. It's just fabulous. And one of the things around energy for her is she loves animals and outdoors. So as she's driving to work now, obviously with lockdown it's slightly different, but historically when she was driving to work, she'd come in and tell me how many animals she'd seen on her drive to work and how excited. And the energy in her, she's like, oh, and these sheep were in the field and I saw these sheep and da 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 da. And this was her inner child coming out, which she'd given a name to. And she started to notice this inner child in her. And what happened for her is her energy balanced more easily because she'd been pushing it down with the judgment. So it's just another example, if you like, where listening to self can help you with some of these principles, rather than saying, right, I've seen the Healthy Mind Platter, I must go and play now. Not quite that spontaneous. It's tuning into that energy that you think, oh, do you know what, I just fancy being like a bit of a doofus for a while and I'm going to go and skip around my garden, whatever that looks like for you. Enjoy it. It's quite liberating, actually. So play is the second principle that we're going to sort of look at today. Now, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I'm going to hold you to a bit of a count today. So if you've got a paper and a pen, this is what I would like you to do. I'm going to guide you through some questions and see how you get on. I'm not going to ask you for feedback. If you wish to share at the end, very happy to hear. That's your choice. I'm not going to ask you for feedback. So whatever you write is yours, and your choice to share is up to you. I put this slide up every week, just hopefully to just re-engage you all to the fact that we can't influence what's going on. We can take responsibility and be responsible citizens, and we can influence the sphere within our reach. Anything else is not in our reach, then that's just going to bring us down. So again, that invitation to strike that balance of knowing what you can influence and what you can take responsibility for is important. So that's my invitation to you, a weekly invitation. And again, just a little mantra from me to you, just please remember to breathe. It's kind of good for you. And if you've been on the webinar about breathing, great. If you haven't, you can access it. And if you have and you can't remember, you can still access it. When I say breathe, I'm asking you to breathe into your diaphragm and out, and give some time to breathing and noticing, am I actually breathing or am I holding my breath again? So I'm not sure this is an exercise you can complete in the timescale we have. This is something to start now. What I would like you to do, maybe as a result of going on today, is to maybe, this could be your focus time, I don't know, or your creative play, or just something nice to do, is to have a look at the 7 principles and identify how much time you spend each day in action with each of these habits. And what you would be interested to see is how that looks on a piece of paper. So you can easily go and do another task and think, well, I was on that webinar and I know that I do this, this and this. And I'm sure you probably do. If we externalize it and you get a visual on it, and you can be creative with it, because that will engage both sides of your brain, which is a healthy thing to do. It might surprise you that either you're doing more than you think in a particular arena, or you're doing less than you think. And then you stop to kid yourself, you'll stop kidding yourself. Sorry, can't get my words out. So this is my first invitation. I'm just going to check the time before I see whether we do this. My second invitation is the one I really want to focus on. So I'm not going to ask you to do that now. So I think this is, if you like this platter, if you can't stand this process, then, you know, this won't probably be your thing. If you think this platter is a good thing and it will help you, this is the invitation I have for you, to maybe map that out for you. So they're the 7 habits, and I would be as creative as you want. That's up to you. What I want to do is I want you to set yourself a little goal taking away from today. And it might be about the webinar today. It might be about your own well-being as a headline. It's wherever your head's at. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a series of questions, and I'm going to just hold I'm going to go there. So write down, and intuitively write down rather than overthinking it, what would you like to have happen as a result of giving yourself some attention, coming on these webinars today or others? What would you like to have happen? I'm not going to give you long on each answer because then you'll overthink. For that thing to happen for you, what needs to happen? So whatever you've decided you'd like to have happen, what actually needs to happen? And can what needs to happen, happen? Can what needs to happen, happen? Now, if you come a bit unstuck here, it might be we need to go back to the first question to come through that thread of questioning to that point. That's just, so be gentle on yourself, trust the answer. And then my final question to you, and will you do what needs to happen? Will you do what needs to happen? And again, those last 2 questions, depending on the answers, will define whether you will or you will not. And if you will not, we would go, typically, if I was working with you one-to-one, we would go back to the first bit of that questioning. This is quite an interesting process, and just for the theorists amongst you, this is a process called clean language, which I'm a massive fan of. I'm a bit of a nerd around clean language, and it talks to the creative side of your brain. So the wording here is very specific, and if we did any other sort of clean language, sometimes people look at it either on the slide or listen to it, and it doesn't make sense in pure English because it's talking to the unconscious mind. So it's very important that if you use this process for yourself, that you ask yourself the question in the words that are there. And it allows stuff to come up that maybe your logical brain wouldn't necessarily think of as easily. So this is quite a quick process. 2 reasons. One is time. And secondly, it is genuinely quite a quick sort of insight into where your motivation is. I kind of like that quote. Bit of a Dalai Lama fan, so I thought I'd share that one with you. I think it's a very powerful quote. I do a lot of work in resilience, and I was running some training talking about blame language. We talk about blame language as part of that training, and it was interesting because one individual in that environment just couldn't get away from blaming someone else and took no responsibility. And I actually subsequently heard that she did reflect, and it did make a shift for her. So blame can come out in language, even if you're not knowingly blaming somebody or it's their fault. You know, it can be quite a subtle one. So I think that's quite a powerful quote, maybe to leave today with. So I'm going to unshare my screen, she says, hang on. And I'm going to invite you to share reflections or questions or anything you feel you want to add. Just remember to unmute yourself if you muted yourself, if you've got any questions. Did everyone have a go at the motivational stuff, and did you get anywhere with it? Was it a helpful, quick process to see where you are? Yeah.
Yeah, the questions are very simple, but they're very telling. And
Yeah.
I wanted more fun for me, which means less looking after others. Yes, I can do that, but it makes me feel guilty, therefore I'm not sure I can do it. That kind of process.
Yeah. So that blocks there for you, which is great. And to recognise that is probably where you need to be. As simple and complex as that is as well. So that's quite honest. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's a nice process to unstuck and get people unstuck sometimes, or start to visit that bit. So.
And it's also that it's almost like you can't have fun till you've got your work done, but that probably needs to be the other way around.
I think so. I was on a webinar this week. Let me see if I can find my notes. Hang on. With 555 other people. That was quite interesting.
Wow.
This chap's a bit of a guru. I'm a bit of a fan of his. Now, what did he say? It was about, see if I can find it. It's just triggered then, it might help you. Hang on. I know it's on my phone because I took a photo of the slide because I wanted to remember it. It was about how you prioritise. The key to, here you go. The key is not to prioritise what's on your schedule, but to schedule your priorities. I just thought that was a great quote. Absolutely cracking quote. I know the author of it because I'd forgotten he'd said it. And I thought that was quite powerful and quite telling, that you prioritize, you schedule your priorities. So that could be interesting. That may help you, may not. Any other thoughts, questions?
There's a question we've got here that says, when the chatter comes in and I'm focusing on something else, I have to write it down. Any other tips for getting rid of the chatter?
Whoa, when it comes in, I've got two answers in my head. I think one is to lean towards it. And what I mean by that is, so writing it down is good because you're beginning to lean towards it. The next step of leaning towards something is to notice what the message is. So the chatter might be certain words, there may be a message. It might be like having, so how do I explain this? So energetically, if the chatter's there, something's not right or something's disturbed your equilibrium. So does something need some attention? Do you need to stop for 5 minutes and just pay attention to the fact that you have chatter and go, oh, right, okay, it's coming again. So going towards it is a way of allowing it to move through quicker. Can't delete it, you can move it through a bit quicker. So I think if you've been on the one we talked about before, there's like a wave and you ride that wave and it comes down a little bit quicker into an ebb and flow. So leaning towards it. I think writing it down is one thought. The other thing is, and you know, environment permitting, have a conversation with it, give it some attention. You know, if the chat is there, respond. Say, yes, thank you, I've noticed that. Oh, that's really helpful, thank you very much. It's like having a small child on your, and the more you ignore it, the more it goes, yeah? So whether you've had kids or not, we can all relate to that. You know, somebody, mum, what? Oh, hi. You know, and that attention is really quite interesting if you take that principle. So writing it down is one way of attending to it. I would maybe just take it a little bit further and just notice it. And if it is really heightened, some of the stuff that we've covered, like breathing and bringing yourself and giving yourself time and space rather than trying to write it down and move on. So hopefully that gives you some tips. Was there any others?
No, not at the minute.
Oh, okay. Well, if everyone's happy, we nearly had another participant there. If everyone's happy and there's no other questions, I would be happy to say, I think I've actually nearly been on time today. It's quite impressive. Unknown. I'm going to take that as a win. I think we'll set up again for next week, diaries permitting, and we'll do the last 3 principles, and then I'll have a chat in the background and see whether there's any further webinars to pick up, and if not, we'll take it from there. So, and I have to say, just very selfishly, it's quite nice to see you all. I like that. So thank you for being brave. Appreciate it. So I will bid you farewell. have a fabulous day. If you need to contact me, you can. I'm happy to support away. If you reflect on this and you need further support, you can contact me through my email, which you can find quite easily. So thank you so much. Oh, no worries about visuals. It's fine. It's fine. You're there. It's all good. So not a problem at all. So I'm going to say thank you very much, and we'll see you